Hello, fellow film chewers. Welcome back to the Oscars Project, where we discuss every Best Picture winner from 1960 to current day. This week we were in 1982, and the Best Picture winner was Gandhi, directed by Richard Attenborough. The runners-up: E.T., Missing, Tootsie, and The Verdict. Here with Jared and Chris, and have a question for both of you, and that is, what are your thoughts on the film starting with his death? Does that set up the film? Does that give you, is it more of a, is it a good thing to see where all of his efforts ended up getting him? Or what are your feelings on the film starting with that instead of starting with just his youth? Jared, take it away.
With with it being a biopic, I don't think that's a bad thing. You know he's going to die someday, so that was interesting, yeah, because I don't know. I think it works in this case. I think it works. I think it gives you a this grounding in reality that because this guy was quite the mythic figure in his lifetime, and it gives you this immediate grounding in reality that he is, he's just a guy like anybody else. And when you go and see the rest of the film after the death scene, you start to see what a person he was, what an amazing person he was to do what he did to get to that point, and eventually knowing that he's just human and he's going to eventually die like the rest of us, So I think it worked pretty well for the film.
It was almost like a framing narrative in terms of the film, in terms of asking the audience from the very start, why would somebody want to kill this man? And as the events of the film kind of unfold, that question only gets amplified, I think, by the events of the film, especially with how he lived his life and how he went about resolving conflict. The fact that he was shot in cold blood in the middle of the day, not secretively, as an act of defiance almost to who he was, I think creates a really interesting question. I think that the film seeks the answer.
Yeah, I was watching the film. I was wondering, is that better to not know where his death or how he dies? But I think after giving it some thought, I think it, like you said, it's a way to frame it and to kind of show you where, kind of where it ends, and you start to put the pieces together and almost run backwards. So yeah, but I think it's interesting to start there and just exactly how on screen how he died. But
so here I have a question for both of you, actually, going into this, which is great. So this is the third biopic I think we've got in our run. So after Lawrence of Arabia and Patton, I think. And interestingly, biopics, I think you would think that all biopics were of great men. Rank your three men in terms of greatness. Steve, take it away.
Like, as far as to compare all of them?
Yeah, to compare the three of them.
Yeah, I think this is probably story-wise my favorite one. I think it was the most impactful one, the most inspiring one. Lawrence of Arabia, I think, you explore the changes that he goes through, and it's a different kind of story. But I think this story is more inspiring and uplifting and hopeful, even though, I think we've said time and time again that, people complain about dark stories and, dark, disturbing, nothing's more disturbing than history. So to put it in perspective, and I think it's interesting, it's to see, what he fought for independence, and then after they have independence, then there's a whole nother set of problems to deal with.
Absolutely.
All that is very, I think that was the most engaging story of the three. I think Lawrence of Arabia is probably the most. It was the most visually stunning. It was
Yeah.
more visually stunning, and the set, the cinematography and the landscapes. I think that was more appealing. But I think the story for Gandhi, I think, was the
Yeah.
most engaging for me.
Yeah. I mean, as far as inspiring characters, Gandhi takes the cake. As far as out of those three, I don't find Patton very inspiring at all, really. But just a bullheaded general doing his job. But the and I respect Lawrence Array for what he went through. I
Mhm.
think what he was trying to accomplish was way beyond what the situation was going to allow him to accomplish in his case. And it was kind of a doomed effort almost. But and in a way, Gandhi's effort was a little bit doomed as well. But his example, I think, is way up there. And as far as inspiration goes, and what he was trying to say. So I think, yeah, he's definitely the greater character.
Hmm.
I mean, Lawrence of Arabia, like you said, Steve, is a better comic book as far as visuals. But this wasn't bad though.
No.
Yeah.
Not like
Yeah.
saying
Beautiful.
this film had its chock fair share of nice visuals. But it's hard to beat Lawrence of Arabia for the visual
Yeah.
aspect of it. But
Yeah. And interestingly directed by Santa Claus. So Richard Attenborough, obviously Santa Claus and Miracle on 34th Street,
oh,
and
Oh,
also brother of David Attenborough of the nature documentary. So you sort of get this nice kind of meeting of minds in the worlds, as it was. So yeah,
hmm. I think this one was for the runtime. It was, you felt it the least. I think
oh yeah,
Patton
yeah,
was a slog.
yeah.
Lawrence of Arabia had its moments where it really drug,
mm-hmm.
but I didn't feel the length as much. Before I knew it, I was an hour and a half in.
Yeah. It was a compelling
Yeah.
watch the whole way through. The events of the movie were such that there always felt like there was something happening, which I think is a really interesting point to make, because we often have this perception that pacifism is about inaction. And actually, Gandhi proved that pacifism was about anything but inaction in some ways, and that a movie about a pacifist would seem to be one that would drag because there'd be nothing happening. But yes, I think it's a very intentional choice to present the film in such a propulsive way.
If he lived in current day,
Mm.
I think it would end much differently for him. I don't think. I don't think maybe I'm being cynical, but I'm not sure if the inaction pacifist would. He'd probably just disappear one day.
Yeah, it's interesting because an awful lot, and this is actually one of the points I have about the film. An awful lot about what makes this a good film is the fact that his life's interesting rather than necessarily it being a great film. If you know what I mean, it's I suppose you can't have one without the other in some ways, but like what makes this a really good film is the fact that he's such an interesting and diverse character, and the fact that he would have been a nobody if his stands didn't result in actual change. I actually thought starting in South Africa and showing him being part of a culture that and having an effect in a culture that he wasn't actually part of was actually really interesting, because then by the time he did
Hmm.
get home, it was much more interesting to say, oh, this is him trying to affect change in his own country by inaction, by dressing in cloth that he spun himself and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I found that actually quite fascinating that he spent so much time in South Africa.
Mm.
I didn't realize that about him, and it was very interesting because he's very much a character who's a person who was defined by what he was not. You know,
Mhm.
he wasn't white enough for South Africa. He wasn't he wasn't completely immersed in his own country's culture until later on.
Yeah.
Like when he first got back, he was actually questioning whether he was Indian enough for India, and I found that pretty interesting as well. And but yet he was. But he's thrown off a train in
Hmm.
South Africa for his
That's
race and
right.
stuff. And I like how all that ignited his activist tendencies, and and uh, and it also it showed that he was able to deal with people on their level a lot, in which what he did when he all those lessons he learned there, he was able to take with him to India to
Yeah.
deal with people on their level, and that was his one of his strong points was that as a person was that he's able to do that.
Hmm.
The point about whether in modern society he would be either as effective or be allowed to do it is really interesting, because I don't think there's been a character like this that's prominent in this, and certainly in my recent life. You know, if you take from this certain century, anybody that's come to this kind of prominence and power, somebody that traded it in their own message so strongly that the threat of them killing themselves sort of united everybody in some ways. You know, it's sort of like to lose that person. Like it boggles my mind that somebody would be able to reach that kind of pinnacle of influence or power by being essentially a kind and gentle and forthright principled person in that way, without kind of stirring up kind of hate in some way. It just seems so alien in today's world, and maybe that's where the power of his message and the power of this film really lies, is that it seems a world away. It's almost like a science fiction story in some
Yeah.
strange kind of way.
Yeah. It just, I wonder during the film, does it take, if you are a leader or a prominent figure, does it require more devotion to be inactive, to be a pacifist,
Mm.
have a peaceful protest, or is it to require more devotion to commit violence and to fight to convince someone? What takes more? And I think it's the pacifist side. I think
Yeah.
the first reaction for most people is to fight back, isn't to walk and get your ass kicked and hope you don't get killed. And so yeah, it's to inspire so many people to be a pacifist, to be peaceful. I mean,
Yeah.
that's insane.
Yeah, and you have to be able to. Yeah, it is insane. You have to, because you have to be able to live with um your decisions on that front too, because there was a lot of people massacred uh
Yeah.
because of trying to follow his tenets and stuff like that. There was there was some really horrible massacres, and the the that, and then to still have the conviction to say to people, please don't fight,
Back. Yeah.
even in the face of that, is very, very strong conviction that I don't think, yeah, it would be hard. I'd be hard pressed to look around today to find that kind of conviction in any of the world leaders that we see now.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because it's kind of showed it would be to how easy it is to fight somebody that you know is going to fight back in same terms. Like, so the massacre that happened, they tried everything with him. They arrested him. They didn't arrest him. Arrest everybody but him. They really didn't know how to handle his message, because if you go back to South Africa, a lot of the thing that he was trying to influence was media, and the idea that if he could capture media to be back home in Britain, that this message would translate badly on the people in power there back home, then he would win the war. And you actually see a little bit of that shift as we move through the century. that actually media was only part of the issue. They could sort of control the message how they wanted, but actually that the message would always stay prevalent regardless of whether they massacred people or whether they locked them up or did nothing. The message was still strong at that stage. And he realized that it was a numbers game. I think from it, that there were so many of them that all they had to do was stick to message. And after a while, there had to be change because their general strike, as it was, brought the whole country to a standstill. And the whole colonial machine was brought to a halt basically because they decided not to work for one day or basically extend their holiday for one day as it was, which was incredibly clever. And I think it's something that I think is lost in modern society, that kind of mass organization would create massive change in 24 hours. In current society, because of how capitalism works and how capitalist society works, is that if the machine doesn't keep ticking over for every second of every day, there's a bit of a problem there. So I don't see how that would happen in modern times, but it is sort of inspiring that they took down basically what was the British Empire and that kind of stuff out of what was their golden goose. India was the British Empire's golden goose. It was, if you ever listen to the Empire podcast, it's absolutely incredible. The fact that how much wealth India by itself was driving the world's economy at that stage. So the fact that they managed to get independence at that stage by any measure, whether violent or otherwise, is quite astonishing.
Yeah, the massacre depicted in the film, the one right before intermission, was I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and the death toll isn't known, but they estimate between 1,000 and 1,500 deaths and 1,500 injuries. And so yeah, that was tough. I mean,
yeah,
I think that was. I didn't know about that until watching the film.
Yeah, and actually to that point, Steve, it speaks an awful lot about movies in general and biopics and that kind of stuff. The movies and art do the job that should be done in schools. I had never known about that massacre at all, and yet I grew up in a British schooling system that is the evils of colonialism and all the rest of it are not taught. They have to be discovered in these kind of in these kind of avenues, which I think speaks an awful lot to, about how society works, etc., and what forms as entertainment in some ways.
Yeah, history is written by the victors, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
Yeah.
It certainly is. Yeah, it's very interesting. I knew there was one. I just didn't know that much about it.
Yeah,
and it's interesting that I think when you look at going back to the South Africa experience that he had, I think when he returns to India, he doesn't quite know India the way that other people do, but I think that allows him to bring a somewhat outsider perspective to it. And so when he had that greater perspective, he was able to implement his theories without being completely, when you're too far inside something, you have blinders on, and he was able to go in with blinders off and have that outside experience coming in to try to save his own people, basically. And I think that, like you said, that helped him with keeping his convictions and the way he was approaching things.
Yeah.
Speaking of numbers game, and we talk about the massacre that took place and all the deaths, would more people have been killed if it was a violent, instead of it being a peaceful? So if they would have battled, if they would have fought, had a war, a physical conflict, I think more people would have died. Not to say it's just
Right.
a numbers game,
Yeah.
deaths.
If they
But-
would have had a war of independence.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus the fact that it was women and children and that kind of stuff, there was really no defense for the British government at that stage. It was an absolute disaster for them in a lot of ways, because they couldn't spin that story in another way. They couldn't kind of turn around and say, oh, that was because they were being insurgents or otherwise. It was just people sitting on the grass essentially and sitting peacefully, and they just opened fire on them. And I thought the scene where they're questioning the major or general or whatever at the end was incredible, actually, with him going, so they were trying to give him an out and basically saying, so did you know? Maybe you didn't know there was women and children. No, we knew.
Yeah.
And sort of was very eye opening in a lot of ways. Very powerful movie, I think, in that regard, because it was the pacifism and the lack of actually fighting back that cost them. And actually, the one time they did fight back, remember when they burned out the station, essentially, was when they lost impetus in their campaign.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, and Ben Kingsley's performance was outstanding. Did he win the best actor?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, he did. Okay.
That would have been a scandal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was. I thought it was very subtle. And because I like how he presented in a lot of scenes. He presented silently. He didn't have to say much to act much, and I thought the way he did it was just outstanding. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah. I'm not a super fan of the coloring of the skin. And
sometimes you could tell that you could see the
or otherwise, because again, there must have been plenty of people that could have played that part without kind of that thing. But as Varsha was saying, he was half Indian, I think, in heritage anyway. So at least there was an ethnic kind of link there, which kind of gave it some meaning, or otherwise, because like it just wouldn't happen today at all. This kind of darkening of the skin to play an act, because
no.
it feels out of place. But as you say, his performance was so extraordinary, and gave it such weight without ever straying into extreme motion, if you know what I mean. An awful lot of over the top performances, especially around that time, were very much of the form of, here there's a bit of overacting happening at this stage, and that's what great acting looks like. Whereas in this case, as you say, very restrained, and almost the silence and the peacefulness and the look and everything kind of give it its power and its meaning.
Yeah. Did he lose weight? So did he actually physically lose weight for?
Well, he's quite a slight
right?
man anyway. Yeah, but I'd say even for that, he must have, absolutely.
Yeah. I thought he did really good. I mean, it's hard to maintain the makeup throughout a 3-hour movie, but there were a few moments where it was pretty obvious. It was splotches, but no, I think that's being nitpicky. But I laughed when I saw Cliff from Cheers.
Yes,
driving the Jeep.
Yeah,
he's awful.
Yeah, but I was like, his accent's all wrong, and he's just he's just his own accent. Yeah, where's Coach? Yeah, that was funny.
That was the his priest friend in the beginning was the guy from Chariots of Fire, right?
Chariots of Fire, yes, I know. Yeah, it was Ben Charlton. Yeah,
because I looked familiar. Okay,
yeah. I kept waiting for him to put his head back while he was running, but
yeah, he didn't run. He didn't break into a run, but maybe he would have if he had. Yeah, but
that's pretty impressive to be part of 2 Best Picture winners in 2 years, even if you're just a minor character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a couple of other people. Candice Bergen. I'm surprised to see her.
Yes, Candice Bergen was in there as well. Yes, absolutely.
Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
Was the reporter.
Was a very good Walker. Yeah. Which they made a joke of at the very least, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great
And
film.
another interesting fact was he was married at 13.
Yeah.
That's right.
I was like, wow.
Arranged marriage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
arranged marriage. Yep.
That still
Yeah,
happens today. I'm not sure about the age, but arranged
I think so.
marriages.
Yeah. I think arranged marriages are still a thing.
Mhm.
I thought interestingly as well that whole scene where he had basically ordered his wife to clean the toilets, and how that resolved. Again, it showed him taking responsibility for not applying his own beliefs correctly or otherwise to his own wife, and then sort of again winning the war, the argument by virtue of climbing down and apologizing. I thought that was a very powerful scene in its own right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In the all the times that he was uh willingly just said, "All right, throw me in prison."
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that was that is so like opposite to how everybody else in the world kind of reacts to that concept of being thrown in prison. For him, it was a power move, but
Mhm.
Yep.
for anybody else, it's what we fear, and nobody wants to be locked up. And just taking that tact, I think, threw off so many people that were trying to stop him. It always took him aback. Like, wait a minute, what do you mean? What do you mean you're just gonna go and just gonna sit here in prison? What am I gonna do
Can't be
now?
enough. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Well,
I
you've
just
also got to appreciate that actually prison was an upgrade in his standard of living. If you want to look at it that way, he lived very, very
some cases, yeah, yeah,
poorly, and he didn't want for anything, um, kind of materialistic or otherwise, which again was part of his power or otherwise, insofar as they couldn't get to him that way by depriving him of anything because he was so depriving himself anyway.
very much so, yeah,
I think it also, we've kind of touched on this, but it also demonstrates the power of media, especially then, because it
Yeah,
was so important to be portrayed in a certain way. And if Walker hadn't portrayed it actually as it happened, then this whole story would have been much different.
yeah,
If he was, catering to the government, to the English, then no one would ever know.
yeah.
mhm,
So
yeah.
Gandhi's whole thing would have crumbled. I mean,
Another reason why I think it would be real difficult to pull off something like this today is I think he would just be looked at as a meme for a little while and would be forgotten about for the next
Yeah.
thing. And it's just things today don't have the resonance and the staying power
The message, yeah.
that his message would had when it came out.
Mm, yeah, it is an interesting thing. And then obviously, we'd read Midnight's Children uh, earlier on this year, Jared,
Yeah.
which depicts a time period that goes towards the last third of this film when India and Pakistan were formed to separate the Hindu and the Muslim people, etc., and kind of these whole things put together. It I think it's fair to say that it showed, obviously in the murder of Gandhi in the end, actually how much more problematic this was, because you could feel the tensions when Jinnah and Nehru and Gandhi were around at the time, and how strong the feelings were that Gandhi wasn't even aware of. I think it's a bit that he underestimated, was the depth of feeling, um, as to
Yeah.
how compromised people would feel in a united country.
Yeah. I like well, Gandhi was I think Gandhi was aware because he was very, very stringent about there must be Hindu
Mm-hmm.
Muslim unity.
Yeah.
And he kept saying that, he kept bringing that up. People would ask him um about his stance and he would say, I am Muslim, I am
Hmm.
Hindi, I am Christian, I am Jew.
Yeah.
He said he's all those things, um, and it just like the infusion of the religion into their politics, their way of life, and everything else. Um, he was trying to overcome all that. Religion screws everything up, anyways.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And then, and it didn't work. If for his goal to have a united
That's
India
right.
to work, they ended up splitting the territory and making that separate Pakistan. The creation of Pakistan, which we also read about in Midnight's Children as well.
Hmm.
And the and we also read about how that split a lot of things up that wasn't the intention,
Yeah.
because of how spread out some of the sects were. And I found that actually kind of sad. That there was a big hint of you could kind of see the sadness in the way Kingsley portrayed
Yeah.
that aspect of, there was something about it not working when he went into the starving mode because of that. And they all told him you can start eating now, it's all over, but you just knew
Yeah.
it couldn't last. Just the strains are too strongly interwoven into the uh into the different populace and sects,
Yeah.
and even Gandhi couldn't overcome that part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Very,
Yeah,
very sad. Very sad. And there's certainly an element of he felt he was an old man. It wasn't his fight anymore. Do you know, it was kind
sure.
of that feeling. But also, as somebody that lives and has grown up in a not totally dissimilar conflict, you see how
Mhm.
you know, conflict and death and murder and all those things in the past. It was almost like a mirror held up to everything he stood for. There was too much murder and death and suffering on the Hindu and the Muslim part for them just to sit aside and just kind of rebuild again and forget it all happened. And it's very similar to my own country in that regard. For as much as people would have intentions that would happen, you can't just totally brush over the fact that there's been an awful lot of hurt in over centuries in some cases that to kind of brush over and people to cross in. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's reflective in the line where he says, "I've traveled so far, and all I've done is just come back home."
yeah,
And that kind of relates that to that theme.
yeah,
It's not so awful though to fight so long for independence and to go through all this, and you get there with the same group of people, and everyone has completely different ideas on how it should be.
yeah,
How to go from here. So it's fascinating throughout history how that works, and the battle for independence, and then who decides then what? Okay, we have it. Now what? And everyone has different ideas, and then other new conflicts arise, and
Yeah,
it's never ends.
and it was interesting to kind of look at and go that there were good people in the room. Or certainly it's depicted as, although I think they did gin it a little bit dirty in the film, in some regards that. But there were good people in the room that all had the same intentions as him, but actually in the bigger scheme of the thing, with that many people that they had to influence and that many regions that they had to get the message to, it was just sort of impossible at the end.
indeed, and it still goes on today.
And it still goes on today, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Probably to the end of time.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In it's interesting because in starving himself, he sought to starve the hatred out of a nation.
Mm,
It was
I
kind
love
of
that point.
like
Yeah.
that was his point, his means of um trying to get the nation aligned with him. And he succeeds on small levels, um here and there, temporary. temporary success. I mean, the independence of India was the biggest success earlier on, and then later on, when the when he was trying to keep it one India, that there was only just a temporary truce of sorts when he had these people finally coming together over his deathbed to try and get rid of that hatred. You could see all the stares and all the people hanging over him, and just temporarily putting that hatred aside just to be there. Um, in a it's a temporary success, but it was still it was very moving cinematically. Um, and so that was very powerful scenes throughout the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How did you guys like the symbolism of his weaving cloth? And to me, it was always like this image of weaving the strands of fate, and that's how I took it every time I saw that. I was like, oh, here he goes again, weaving that cloth, and he's picking the strands of fate and making. With how the cloth goes is how India's fate goes, and I really like that imagery that they threw into the movie.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot actually in the Stranding, because obviously a lot of the poverty was based over the fact that the Indian cloth was no longer being needed, and that a lot of the words, and the fact that he was making his own clothes, basically say like, we're self-sustaining here. We do not need the outside fabrics. Even the fact of when he wasn't it Candice Bergen he was talking to about how to hold the thread gently, not too tightly, and keep on moving it, and that kind of stuff. And again, it was very, very kind of allegorical to the fluid nation of the state and other people's feelings and stuff. So it kept coming back round to that, and there was quite a lot of that kind of interwoven, excuse the pun again, into the story.
Yeah. No. Dead on.
Yeah. That's great. Where does it rank?
Yeah. It's probably right outside the top 10 for me. I didn't make my list. But
you haven't made your list yet, Steve. Come on, you need to get on this, and also realize that as soon as you make the list, that you'll make the same list in another kind of couple of months' time, and then realize, I don't like my original list.
Yeah. I'm looking at it now, and I'm like, do I like this? I don't know if I like this. I'm not sure. It's tough because I don't think I enjoyed it as much as some of the other films. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but it's not the happiest sitting. It doesn't have that. That rah-rah aspect of like a Rocky or the grand, like The Sound of Music has all this lovely grand stuff in it that you want to see. But you can't fault the film for what it is at all. It's a good film. So it's hard to place it, do I want to be objective and make it higher than my enjoyment level, or So I liked it, but I don't know if I'm gonna like it more than some of these other films. So that's like Steve said, I think it's gonna be just outside the top 10 somewhere.
Yeah, it's right around that position for me as well. I think a lot of my thoughts about this film come into the fact that I was dreading watching another 3-hour plus movie. Especially a biopic, and as you said, Steve, it kind of surprised me about how eminently watchable it was, how I didn't want to turn it off even when it was going, how compelling the character he was, but also, as I said earlier, how much of that is the story of his life and how much of that was actually the film itself and the filmmaking, and how are the two things even separate? I don't know. I find that very difficult to and it's the kind of one of the reasons that I don't like biopics winning awards because they're not original stories. They are just retellings of events that already happened, and you can do it well and you can do it poorly. You could, in some ways, kind of think of Tom Jones as a real person and make what you want of that as you come through as a story of his life. But yeah, it's it is interesting, and I find it very hard to kind of characterize both biopics as films, but also performances of people that are acting somebody that actually lived, a mimicry of some sort, versus somebody that's doing an entirely creating their own character. And the power of that feels like a folly as well. You're just looking at your list, aren't you, Jared? Going,
yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to place here. I can't do it. I can't place it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think middle of the pack probably for me.
Yeah. And interestingly, John Gielgud again, another person that was in Shire Safar, was in this as well. He was like the viceroy kind of guy in the end. So yeah, but yeah, look, when you think about it, it was Gandhi, Ben Kingsley as Gandhi, or Dustin Hoffman as Tootsie this year for best performance. You know, so how do you compare those two?
Yeah, those are both brilliant performances.
Both brilliant, yeah. Yeah. So,
if we had a do-over, would E.T. be the best picture of this year?
That goes back to if Star Wars won.
If Stars had won, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I genuinely, if I had to pick another film to go above it, it would be Tootsie. And I really enjoy Missing as well. I think the Jack Lemmon, Sissy Spacek picture, Costa Gavras picture, Missing's brilliant film. But I've always loved Tootsie from I was a very young man, for kind of not just its comedic effect, but actually an awful lot of the things that it was saying. I think again, it's incredibly relevant in modern times. But I think I'm quite happy that Gandhi win this. If we've talked about a couple of other biopics that won, they don't hold a candle to Gandhi, even as a film or as a man. I think in a lot of ways. So,
yeah.
I have a feeling that this is going to get harder and harder to place these films.
Oh yeah,
as we go along. Yeah.
Well, next up, 83 is Terms of Endearment.
Never saw that one.
Either.
Me neither. No. And we've got another biopic, I think, the year afterwards. So
Amadeus.
Yeah. So.
Oh well, I did see that.
Do that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Out of Africa, Platoon, The Last Emperor, Rain Man, Drive Miss Daisy to finish off the 80s.
Yeah. I've seen most of those. That's good. It'd be nice to revisit.
Yeah. It'll be, yeah.
Interesting indeed.
Well, cool. Yeah. So overall, a good movie.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like 3 hours, but not the best either. But good performances. Learned a few things. So
yeah, indeed.
Yeah. I'm glad to know more about Gandhi's life.
I agree.
So that's definitely a positive experience.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, cool. So on to 1983. In the meantime, Jared, where can people find you?
You can find me at the YouTube channel, The Fantasy Thinker, and on the podcast Speculative Speculations, as well as on Panel Chewing, Pick of the Week.
And Chris?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Chris Mohan. You can find me on that same podcast, Speculative Speculations. You can find me on PageTune in general. Yeah, any of those places will do.
Awesome. So until next time, we will touch everyone very soon. Thanks for listening, and on to 1983.